In recent news coverage, we have been seeing more of the term settler. The dictionary definition of settler is someone who settles in a new region or colony, or a person who goes to live in a new place where few people have lived before. Sounds like a neutral enough term, but it has become somewhat politicized by activists who essentially see Canada as an illegitimate state occupying stolen land. According to Chelsea Vowell, the author of Indigenous Rights, a guide to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit issues in Canada, settlers are the non-Indigenous peoples living in Canada who form the European-descended socio-political majority. Upon seeing that definition, you kind of wonder, okay, so we're acknowledging Indigenous people, we're acknowledging European-descended people, so Anglo and Franco-Canadians, but what about the multitude of people from other cultures who reside in Canada? How do they fit into this Indigenous settler dichotomy? And I don't think the people who use the word settler have actually really figured that out. Outlets like Vice have tried to cover the question of who is and who isn't a settler. One author interviewed in this Vice piece, Jade Brooks, was asked, "How do you define settlers?" She answered, "Basically, European people. Anyone outside of Indigenous or Black Canadians." She was then asked, "So who is a settler and who isn't?" She said, "That settler word is tricky. I wouldn't be a settler because I was born and raised here. All my family is from here, my parents are from here. I guess I wouldn't want to use that term towards Black people because we're really Indigenous to everywhere in the world." Okay, so European-descended people who were born and raised here and whose parents and families are here are settlers. So Europeans, yes, settlers. But if the same situation applies to someone who is not European descended, then they are not a settler. I guess they are just something else. A professor also gives their definition of settler in this Vice article. Ashley Marshall says, "I think the term settler means or comes from the idea that we are setting up shop. We are settling in here. We are not Indigenous to the land. I think it's a confession of we are foreigners." Now, did you catch that phrase, Indigenous to the land? Well, it is an inaccurate phrase, as the most reliable research we've got postulates that no peoples are Indigenous to the North American continent. The most accepted theory is that Indigenous or Native peoples actually came to North America via the Bering Strait crossing, so what would have been a land bridge connecting Siberia and Alaska about 20,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower. There have been some disputes about some aspects of that theory. Some researchers are saying that perhaps people actually sailed along the coast to get to North America, or perhaps they came up from South America. But there is currently no evidence to indicate that any people originate in North America. As the United Nations says, Indigenous is used to refer broadly to peoples of long settlement and connection to specific lands. So there's that word settle, right? Settlement, settler. In a recent opinion piece in the Washington Post, an academic at the University of Ottawa writes, "When a settler reacts to being called a settler by bunching up his or her guts and getting all worked up, he or she is betraying a guilt that proves just how useful the term is. Calling someone a settler has the effect of asking the person to recognize their power and position within a colonial state." Some people see the term settler as divisive. You know, it erases the unity of being called a Canadian. It pits Canadians against each other, or they feel that it erases their heritage. It erases their ancestors who have been in Canada for generations. So is it offensive? Well, offense is largely subjective. If someone were to call me a settler, it wouldn't bother me. But when someone uses the word settler, you're kind of alerted that there is a high possibility that they subscribe to a mentality wherein European-descended Canadians should confess to perpetuating a genocidal state, or they should apologize constantly for the sins of their ancestors, or you should subscribe to a decolonization agenda and start calling North America Turtle Island, and you should be considering yourself a guest on land that does not belong to you, and all that. So is the term settler offensive? I don't think so, but the term does come along with some questionable implications that we should be aware of. I'm Lindsay Shepherd with True North. Thanks for watching.